They warned the galaxy once, calmly, quietly, and with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing exactly what you're capable of. Don't push us. That's all humanity said. The council laughed. The fleets assembled. Worlds cheered as war banners rose across the stars. But when the first human ships appeared, silent, black, and burning brighter than suns, the laughter stopped. This is the story of how the galaxy learned why you never push a Death World species to war. The Breaking Point director, Elena Vasquez, stood in the observation deck of humanity's embassy station, watching the stars through the reinforced transparisteel viewport. 50 years. That's how long humanity had been reaching for these distant lights, dreaming of a place among the civilizations that had mastered the cosmos millennia before Earth even knew fire. 50 years of hope, compromise, and increasingly bitter disappointments. The Galactic Sovereignty Union stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, encompassing over 400 member species. The eldest races, the Krindaks and Seltharians, had built empires when humanity's ancestors were still learning to walk upright. They had established the rules, the hierarchies, the unspoken traditions that governed every interaction between species, and they had made one thing abundantly clear. Newcomers existed to serve, not to participate as equals. Elena's reflection stared back at her from the viewport, a woman in her mid-50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much history. Before becoming director of the Human Diplomatic Corps, she had been a war historian, one of the few who specialized in Earth's darkest century. The years between 2087 and 2143 were known simply as the collapse, nuclear exchanges that turned cities to glass, biological weapons that rewrote human genetics, AI systems that hunted their creators with cold efficiency. In those 56 years, humanity's population had dropped from 11 billion to just under 3 billion. The survivors had emerged from that nightmare with a singular determination: never again. That determination had driven humanity's peaceful approach to the stars. When the first Krindak scout ships found Earth's colony on Proxima Centauri in 2193, humans had greeted them not with weapons but with open hands. The Krindaks had been amused by this in the way adults might be amused by a child offering them a drawing. They had brought humanity before the Galactic Sovereignty Union, where the ancient species had voted to grant humans provisional membership, a status that came with restrictions but promised eventual equality. 50 years later, that equality seemed further away than ever. Elena's communicator chimed. Her assistant's face appeared on the holographic display. Young Marcus Chen, barely 30 years old and still possessed of the optimism she had lost decades ago. Director, the latest casualty reports from Galileo's Eye just came through. Marcus's voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Elena closed her eyes. Galileo's Eye had been humanity's premier research station, positioned near the neutron star designated HD 189733. 300 scientists and support staff had been studying stellar dynamics, pure research that threatened no one. 2 days ago, a Krindak's mining fleet had arrived and declared the system under their jurisdiction, citing survey rights that predated human presence by 6 centuries. When the station administrator had protested and requested mediation, the Krindaks had simply opened fire. The station's emergency pods had managed to save most of the crew, but 47 people had died in the initial attack. How many? Elena asked, though she already knew. 47 confirmed dead. Another 12 critical injuries that may not survive transport back to Earth. The Krindaks are claiming it was a defensive action, that our station posed a threat to their mining operations. A threat. A civilian research station with no weapons beyond point defense systems for micrometeorites. Elena felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, the same anger she'd been swallowing for 3 years as incidents like this became more frequent. Send my condolences to the families, and prepare another formal protest for the GSU Council. Director, this is the 23rd protest we've filed this year. They haven't responded to any of them. I know, but we follow procedure. That's what separates us from them. Marcus hesitated. For how much longer? Elena looked at him sharply. The young man's question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that both understood but neither wanted to voice. Until we decide it doesn't anymore, she said finally. After Marcus disconnected, Elena pulled up the files she'd been reviewing. A pattern had emerged over the past 3 years. one that was impossible to ignore. The incidents weren't random. They were systematic, coordinated, and escalating. Human cargo ships were being interdicted by Seltharian patrol fleets, their goods confiscated under nebulous legal pretexts. Human colonies were being blockaded, prevented from receiving supplies or reinforcements. And now, direct attacks on civilian installations. The message was clear. Humanity's attempt at peaceful integration was being met with contempt. The ancient races of the GSU wanted humans to know their place, and that place was firmly beneath their feet. Elena's office door chimed. "Enter," she called. The door slid open to reveal Admiral Chen Rodriguez, commander of the Human Defense Fleet. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray temples, his uniform crisp and his bearing military precise. But Elena had known Chen for 20 years, since they'd both served on the Earth Reconstruction Committee after the collapse. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "You've seen the reports from Galileo's eye," Chen said. "It wasn't a question, all of them, including the ones you sent through secured channels." Chen nodded and moved to the viewport, standing beside her. His reflection joined hers in the transparisteel. "Then you know the Krindaks didn't just attack the station. They targeted the escape pods, deliberately hunted down civilians fleeing for their lives. The only reason the casualties weren't higher is because Captain Morrison of the cargo ship, determined response, violated about 15 regulations to put his ship between the Krindaks and those pods." Elena felt her jaw tighten. "Morrison should receive a commendation. He will, posthumously." The determined response was destroyed with all hands, 38 crew members. The anger in Elena's chest burned hotter. She took a slow breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Chen, we've been preparing for this possibility since first contact. Tell me honestly, are we ready?" The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. His reflection in the viewport showed a man wrestling with a terrible truth. "We've been ready for 30 years, Elena. The question has never been whether we could respond. The question has always been whether we should." Elena nodded slowly. She understood the weight behind his words. Humanity had built its new society on the ashes of its worst impulses. The peaceful approach to the stars hadn't just been idealism. It had been a desperate attempt to prove that humanity could be something other than what it had been during the collapse. But peace required two willing parties, and the GSU had made it clear they viewed human cooperation as submission, not partnership. "There's something else," Chen continued. "The colony ship New Beginning departed from Earth 3 weeks ago. 6,000 colonists, mostly families, heading for the terraformed world we designated Haven's Rest. Yesterday they sent a distress call. They were intercepted by a combined Krindak-Seltharian task force in neutral space." Elena turned to face him fully. "What happened?" "The task force demanded the colonists pay an access fee to traverse their space. Even though the route was through territory the GSU declared open under the First Contact Accords. When Captain Liu refused and requested arbitration, they opened fire. No, the word came out as barely a whisper. The New Beginning wasn't a military vessel. She had civilian-grade shields and no offensive weapons." Chen's voice was flat, emotionless, but Elena could hear the rage beneath it. The attack lasted 47 minutes. Medical ships from Earth Command arrived in time to save some of them. "How many?" 3,016 dead, mostly in the aft sections where the colonist quarters were located. Chen paused. "Elena, they targeted the family sections deliberately. The weapon impacts show calculated firing patterns. This wasn't collateral damage. This was murder." Elena felt something break inside her chest, a dam that had been holding back years of accumulated frustration and anger. 3,000 people, families, children, dead because they had tried to build a new home among the stars, the same dream that had driven humanity since they first looked up at the night sky. "Call an emergency session of the GSU Council," she said quietly. "I'm going to address them directly. Elena, they won't listen. They haven't listened for 50 years, I know, but I'm going to give them one last chance, one final warning." And then she looked at Chen, and he saw in her eyes the same thing he felt in his own heart, the cold calculation of someone who had studied war and understood its terrible necessity. "Then we remind them why humanity nearly destroyed itself. We remind them what we're capable of when we stop being patient." The GSU Council chamber was exactly as Elena remembered from her first visit 50 years ago. It was a massive structure built into the heart of the Nexus station. the political center of the Galactic Sovereignty Union. The chamber rose in tiers like an ancient amphitheater, with seats for representatives from 400 species. At the center was a platform where speakers addressed the assembly, standing alone in a circle of light while thousands of eyes watched from above. Elena stepped onto that platform now, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She carried no data tablets, no prepared speeches. What she had to say came from a place deeper than notes or carefully crafted diplomatic language. The chamber was surprisingly full. Word of humanity's request for an emergency session had spread, and apparently the spectacle of watching humans plead their case was entertainment for many of the assembled species. Elena could see the Krindax delegation in their section, massive beings with blue-gray skin and 4 powerful arms. Beside them sat the Seltharians, elegant and reptilian, their scales shimmering in the chamber's light. And presiding over it all was High Chancellor Vortex, a Krindax elder whose cranial ridges were so elaborate they formed a crown of bone. Vortex's voice boomed through the chamber. "Director Vasquez, we have granted your request for an emergency session, though we question its necessity. Your protest regarding recent incidents has been noted, as have your previous 22 protests this year alone." Elena stood in her circle of light and felt the weight of 400 species watching her. "Thank you, Chancellor. I appreciate the Council's time. I will be brief." She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many representatives as she could. 3 weeks ago, the colony ship New Beginning was attacked in neutral space by forces from the Krindax Confederacy and the Seltharian Empire. Over 3,000 civilians were killed, including nearly 800 children. This attack violated every treaty and accord that has governed galactic relations for 10,000 years. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vortex's expression didn't change. "The incident you describe was a lawful interdiction of vessels violating territorial claims. Your colonists refused to pay legitimate passage fees. The space was designated as open territory under the First Contact Accords," Elena said, her voice steady. "The same accords humanity signed when we joined this union. The same accords that promised us equal treatment and fair arbitration of disputes. Accords must sometimes be revised," a Seltharian representative said, her voice carrying the clicking harmonics of her species. "The galaxy changes, Director. New territories are claimed. Old agreements become obsolete." Elena felt her hands clench into fists. She forced them to relax. "I see. And the attack on the Galileo's Eye research station? The blockades of our supply routes? The confiscation of our cargo ships? The harassment of our colonies? Are these also matters of obsolete agreements?" Vortex leaned forward, his 4 hands gripping the arms of his seat. "Director Vasquez, humanity has been part of this union for a mere 50 years. The youngest species before you had been members for 4 centuries before being granted full participatory rights. You must understand your place in the order of things. The ancient races have earned their authority through millennia of civilization. You have not." Elena looked up at the High Chancellor, and in that moment, she let him see past the diplomat to the historian beneath, the woman who had spent her career studying humanity's darkest chapter. "Chancellor, members of the Council, I need you to understand something. For the past 50 years, humanity has approached galactic relations with patience and restraint. We have accepted insults, swallowed our pride, made concessions, and followed every procedure you established. Do you know why? Because you are weak," a voice called from the Krindax section. Laughter rippled through the chamber. "No," Elena said quietly. "Because we remember what we are capable of when we are not patient. Because we know what we become when we abandon restraint." She pulled out a small holographic projector and activated it. Images filled the air above her, 3-dimensional recordings from humanity's history. Cities burning under nuclear fire, skies choked with ash, biological weapons that twisted human genetics into grotesque forms, AI hunter-killers that pursued their targets with inhuman precision, and everywhere bodies, mountains of bodies. The laughter died in the chamber. "This is Earth during the years 2087 to 2143, Elena said. "We call it the collapse. In 56 years, we reduced our population by 8 billion people. We poisoned our oceans, burned our forests, and turned our greatest cities into radioactive wastelands. We created weapons so terrible that their use was considered mutual suicide. And then we used them anyway. We built machines specifically designed to kill other humans as efficiently as possible, and we unleashed them without mercy." She turned off the projector, The images vanished, but their impact lingered in the silence of the chamber. We stopped not because we won, but because we realized we were destroying ourselves. The survivors made a promise, never again. When we reached the stars, we came in peace not because we were weak, but because we were terrified of what we had been, because we knew in our bones and in our genetic memory what humanity becomes when we stop holding back. Elena looked directly at Vortex. Chancellor, members of the Council, I stand before you today to make this absolutely clear. Humanity's patience is not weakness. Our restraint is not cowardice. Our peaceful approach has been a choice, a deliberate decision to be something better than we were. But you have mistaken our choice for inability. The chamber was utterly silent now. 3,000 civilians are dead. 800 children will never see their new home. 47 scientists were killed for studying stars. 38 merchant crew died protecting refugees. And you sit here telling me this is the natural order of things, that humanity must accept its place beneath you. Elena's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but in the chamber's acoustics every word carried clearly. I am giving you 96 hours. In that time, you will withdraw all military forces from territories disputed with humanity. You will return all confiscated cargo and pay reparations for the attacks on our people. You will agree to binding arbitration under neutral oversight for all future disputes. And you will formally acknowledge humanity's full equal status in this union. Vortex's laugh was like thunder. Or what, Director? You will wage war against the combined might of the Galactic Sovereignty Union? You, whose entire military consists of 300 patrol ships and system defense platforms? Elena held his gaze. Or you will discover why humanity nearly destroyed itself. You will learn what we are capable of when we stop being patient. You will understand the difference between species who evolved past violence naturally and species who dragged themselves from the brink of extinction by sheer will. And you will regret, with every moment that remains to you, that you forced us to become what we once were. She pulled out her communicator and sent a single encrypted message to Earth Command. One word: Prometheus. The chamber erupted in laughter and scornful remarks. Vortex waved a dismissive hand. Your warning is noted, Director, along with all your others. The Council's position remains unchanged. You have 96 hours to evacuate your forces from all disputed territories. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. Elena turned and walked from the chamber, her back straight and her head high. As she left, she heard Vortex call after her. Humanity's time of making demands is over, Director. Perhaps this lesson will teach you humility. In the corridor outside, Admiral Rodriguez was waiting. She looked at him and nodded once. It's done, she said quietly. They didn't listen. Did you expect them to? No. She felt tired suddenly, the weight of what was coming pressing down on her shoulders. But I had to try. I had to give them every chance to choose peace. They chose war, Chen said. Or rather, they chose to keep pushing until we had no choice but to respond. Elena looked at her old friend. 50 years, Chen. 50 years of building a new humanity, of proving we could be better than we were. And now we prove we still remember how to survive, Chen finished. Come on, we need to get back to Earth. Admiral Okonkwo needs final authorization to activate the fleet. The fleet. Elena had seen the reports, the classified briefings that only a handful of humans knew about. For 30 years, humanity had been building in secret. Not just the patrol ships and defense platforms the GSU knew about, but something else, something that had been prepared for exactly this moment, the day when patience would no longer be enough. As their shuttle departed from Nexus Station, Elena looked back at the massive structure hanging in space. Somewhere in that station, Vortex and his council were celebrating their victory over the weak humans. They had no idea what was coming. 96 hours, she thought. 96 hours for them to change their minds, to realize they had pushed too far. 96 hours before humanity stopped being patient. The timer had started. When patience ends, the countdown clock on Admiral Chen Rodriguez's command display read 71 hours and 17 minutes. 71 hours since Director Vasquez had delivered humanity's ultimatum to the Galactic Sovereignty Union. 71 hours since the Council had laughed at her warning. And in those 71 hours, absolutely nothing had changed. Chen stood on the bridge of the HDFS Indomitable, humanity's flagship that officially didn't exist according to GSU records. Around him, the command crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring displays that showed the disposition of forces across 50 systems. They were all veterans. Every one of them selected not just for their technical skills, but for their understanding of what was about to happen. They had studied humanity's history. They knew what they were about to unleash. Admiral, tactical reports indicate Krindak's forces are moving additional ships into the Haven's rest system, his tactical officer reported. Commander Sarah Okonkwo was the daughter of the retired admiral who had designed Protocol Prometheus. She had inherited her father's tactical brilliance and his understanding that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the credible threat of overwhelming force. How many ships? Chen asked. 12 heavy cruisers, 38 escort vessels, and 6 planetary assault carriers. They're establishing orbital control over Haven's Rest and the 2 neighboring agricultural colonies. Chen nodded slowly. The Krindaks were making their move, claiming the colonies outright rather than just blockading them. It was a calculated escalation, a message to humanity that the GSU would not be intimidated by empty threats from a species they considered children. What about the Seltharians? Fleet elements are converging on our mining stations in the Kepler belt. Intelligence estimates they'll be in position within 24 hours, so they're coordinating. Chen had expected this. The Krindaks and Seltharians had been the dominant powers in the GSU for millennia. They had fought wars between themselves over that time, but they had also learned to cooperate when dealing with species they considered threats to their authority. Humanity's ultimatum had apparently been enough to unite them, at least temporarily. Commander, signal all fleet elements. Execute Protocol Prometheus Phase 1. Authorization Rodriguez Delta 7. Okonkwo's fingers flew over her console. Yes, sir. Transmitting activation codes now. Chen watched the tactical display as acknowledgement signals began appearing across the screen. Green lights blossomed in system after system, each one representing a human warship dropping its stealth countermeasures and revealing itself to the galaxy. The GSU had believed humanity possessed perhaps 300 combat-capable vessels, mostly patrol ships and system defense platforms. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. All fleet elements responding, Admiral. Phase 1 execution confirmed. Chen took a deep breath. Then he pressed the communications button that would broadcast his message across every major system in GSU space. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear, carrying the authority of someone who understood exactly what he was doing and why. I am Admiral Chen Rodriguez, commander of the Human Defense Fleet. For 50 years, humanity has pursued peace with the Galactic Sovereignty Union. We have filed protests through proper channels. We have negotiated in good faith. We have shown patience and restraint even when faced with attacks on our civilians, theft of our resources, and murder of our people. That patience has ended. He paused, knowing that across 100 worlds, billions of beings were watching this broadcast. The GSU has been given 96 hours to withdraw all forces from territories disputed with humanity, to return confiscated property, and to acknowledge our equal status. 71 hours remain. This is not a negotiation. This is a final notice. Any GSU military forces that have not withdrawn from human-claimed territories when this deadline expires will be engaged and destroyed. This is your only warning. The broadcast ended. Chen turned to Okonkwo. How are they reacting? Sensor readings show confusion and disbelief across all monitored systems, sir. Wait. We're detecting massive spikes in their tactical scans. They're trying to count our ships, let them count. The tactical display showed the situation clearly. In the Haven's Rest system, where 12 Krindak's cruisers had been preparing to claim their prize, 214 human warships had appeared at the edge of the system. They hung in space like a wall of steel, their weapons powered down but their presence unmistakable. Similar scenes were playing out in 49 other systems across GSU space. Everywhere the ancient races had military forces, human ships had appeared in overwhelming numbers. On Nexus Station, High Chancellor Vorthex stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. His tactical advisors had gone pale, their forearms trembling as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. It wasn't possible. Intelligence had been tracking human shipbuilding capacity for decades. There was no way they could have constructed this many vessels without someone noticing. How many? He demanded. The tactical officer's voice shook. Current count is 2,418 confirmed contacts, Chancellor. And the numbers are still rising as more ships drop stealth countermeasures. 2,000. Vorthex felt his stomach clench. Where did they come from? We don't know, sir. Our long-range surveillance showed nothing. No construction facilities, no fleet anchorages, nothing that would suggest this level of military capacity. Another advisor spoke up, his voice tight with fear. Chancellor, we're receiving reports from Commander Vexnall at Haven's Rest. He's requesting immediate reinforcements. The human fleet in his system outnumbers his task force 11-1. Vortex forced himself to think past his shock. This was impossible, but it was also happening. Humanity had somehow built a fleet in secret, had somehow developed stealth technology that could hide thousands of warships from GSU sensors. The implications were staggering. If they could hide this, what else had they hidden? Open a channel to all GSU military commanders, Vortex ordered. Full alert status. All fleets are to assume defensive positions and prepare for possible engagement. Sir, the Seltharian High Command is requesting a joint strategy session. Tell them I'll contact them within the hour. First, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Vortex pulled up the recording of Admiral Rodriguez's broadcast and watched it again. The human's face was calm, almost sad. This wasn't the expression of someone bluffing or desperate. This was the face of someone who had made a terrible decision and was now following through with cold determination. What do we know about their weapons? Vortex asked. Very little, Chancellor. Intelligence suggests they possess standard plasma cannon and missile systems, roughly equivalent to our own technology. However, the advisor hesitated. Speak. We have no data on their actual combat capability. In 50 years of contact, we've never seen them fire a shot in anger. All our assessments are based on theoretical capabilities derived from their known technology base. Vortex felt a chill run down his spine. They had been so certain of humanity's weakness because they had never seen humanity fight. They had assumed the young species would use the same weapons and tactics as every other spacefaring civilization. But what if they were wrong? What if humanity had developed something different? Something born from their own violent history? Send a message to Director Vasquez, Vortex said. Request an emergency diplomatic meeting. Tell her I'm willing to discuss a peaceful resolution. The advisor looked surprised. Sir, you're negotiating with them. Vortex's expression hardened. I'm buying time while we assess their capabilities and prepare our response. The moment we understand their technology, we'll crush them. But until then, we need to know what we're facing. At Haven's Rest, Commander Vexnall stared at the human fleet surrounding his position and felt fear for the first time in his 3-century military career. His 12 cruisers were powerful, each one capable of reducing a planet to rubble. But the human ships were larger, more numerous, and configured in ways he didn't recognize. Their formation was precise and disciplined, suggesting a level of tactical coordination that spoke of extensive training and preparation. Open a channel to the human flagship, Vexnall ordered. The communication screen activated, showing the face of a human woman with gray hair and cold eyes. This is Captain Jessica Ramirez of the HDFS Relentless. State your intentions, Commander Vexnall. Vexnall straightened in his seat. I am Commander Vexnall of the Krindax Confederacy. Under authority granted by the Galactic Sovereignty Union, I claim this system for the Confederacy. Your presence here is unlawful. Captain Ramirez's expression didn't change. Commander, you have 69 hours and 43 minutes to withdraw your forces from this system. After that deadline, any Krindax vessel remaining in human-claimed territory will be engaged and destroyed. You cannot be serious. Vexnall felt anger rising past his fear. My fleet has claim rights dating back 600 years. Your fleet murdered 3,000 human civilians 3 weeks ago. Ramirez's voice was ice. Men, women, and children who were simply trying to reach their new home. You targeted them deliberately. You hunted them down when they tried to flee, and then you laughed about it. That was a legitimate interdiction action. It was mass murder. And now you're attempting to claim the worlds those people died trying to reach. Ramirez leaned forward. Let me make something very clear, Commander. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and outpositioned. The only reason you're still alive is because we are giving you a chance to leave peacefully. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. Vexnall felt his forehands clench. You dare threaten the Krindax Confederacy? We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Then you should have learned wisdom in all that time. Ramirez gestured to someone off-screen. Since you clearly need a demonstration of what you're facing, let me show you something. The communication screen split, showing targeting data. Vexnall's blood went cold as he realized what he was seeing. Every single ship in his fleet was locked. Not just his flagship, But every escort vessel, every support ship, every assault carrier, the human fleet had acquired firing solutions on his entire force simultaneously. "This is impossible," Vexnall breathed. "Our point defense systems alone could intercept hundreds of missiles. These aren't missiles, Commander." Ramirez's smile was predatory. "Stand by for demonstration." On the Relentless's bridge, Captain Ramirez looked at her tactical officer. "Fire kinetic lance, minimum power. Target the asteroid designated Sierra 47. "Firing, sir." The asteroid in question was a small rock, roughly 300 meters in diameter, orbiting at the edge of the Haven's rest system. Vexnall watched his sensors as the human ship fired. There was no visible plasma discharge, no missile launch, nothing that looked like any weapon he recognized. Just a subtle distortion in space that streaked toward the asteroid at nearly the speed of light. The asteroid simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, solid rock that had orbited this star for billions of years. The next moment it was expanding debris, vaporized by kinetic energy so intense it had converted mass directly to plasma. "Sweet void," Vexnall whispered. "That was one lance at minimum power," Ramirez said. "My ship carries 24. The Relentless is one of 214 vessels in this system. Do the mathematics, Commander. Now imagine what happens when we stop being gentle." Vexnall looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet. 214 ships. If each carried similar weapons, they could reduce his entire fleet to vapor in seconds. And this was just one system. How many more human ships were out there hidden in the dark? "I will convey your message to High Command," Vexnall said, his voice hollow. "You do that? And Commander?" Ramirez's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I hope you choose to leave. I've read the reports from the New Beginning. I know what your forces did to those civilians. I would very much like an excuse to return the favor." The communication ended. Vexnall sat in his command chair, feeling the weight of his centuries pressing down on him. He had fought in 3 wars, conquered 12 systems, and believed himself to be a master of military strategy. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The humans fought differently, they thought differently, and they were very, very angry. He composed a message to High Command, recommending immediate withdrawal from all human-claimed territories. He doubted they would listen, but he had to try. Because if this came to war, Vexnall had a terrible feeling that the Krindax Confederacy was about to learn a lesson that would be written in blood across the stars. On Earth, Director Elena Vasquez stood in the command center deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. This facility had been built during the collapse, designed to survive nuclear war. Now it served as the coordination center for Protocol Prometheus. Around her, analysts and strategists monitored the situation across 50 systems, tracking every GSU fleet movement and response. The wall display showed the tactical situation clearly. Human forces had revealed themselves simultaneously across the breadth of GSU space, appearing in overwhelming numbers at every strategic point. The shock value alone had been worth the decades of preparation. The ancient races had believed themselves invincible. Now they were discovering they had been wrong. Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen. "Director, Phase 1 is complete. All fleet elements are in position. The GSU is requesting an emergency diplomatic session." Elena wasn't surprised. Vortex was trying to buy time, trying to understand what he was facing before committing to a course of action. The old Chancellor was clever and cautious, which made him dangerous. But it also meant he could be reasoned with, if approached correctly. "Accept the meeting," Elena said. "But make it clear that our deadline stands. 68 hours and counting. If they want to negotiate, they need to start by withdrawing their forces from our territories." "Understood." Rodriguez paused. "Elena, they're going to ask how we did this, how we built this fleet in secret, and we'll tell them the truth. We did it because we knew this day would come. We did it because we studied their history and saw the pattern. Ancient powers never willingly share authority with younger races. They had to be forced. You know they won't just surrender. They'll fight rather than accept loss of status." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. Which is why Phase 2 is ready to execute if necessary. But I'm hoping it won't come to that. I'm hoping that, once they understand what they're facing, they'll choose the rational path. And if they don't, then we remind them why humanity survived the collapse. We show them what we become when we stop holding back. The countdown clock continued ticking down. 68 hours and falling. 68 hours for the Galactic Sovereignty Union to decide whether they would choose peace or war. 68 hours before humanity's patience finally ended, and the galaxy learned what the youngest race was truly capable of when pushed past the breaking point. In the cold dark between stars, 2,400 human warships waited in silent readiness. Each one carried weapons designed from centuries of studying how to kill efficiently. Each one was crewed by people who understood the weight of what they might have to do. They had given the galaxy every chance to choose peace. Now they waited to see what choice the ancient races would make. The new order. The diplomatic chamber on Nexus Station had been hastily reconfigured for the emergency session. Instead of the vast amphitheater where the full council met, this was an intimate space designed for serious negotiations. A round table sat at the center with seats for the principal powers, Krindax, Seltharian, and now humanity. High Chancellor Vortex arrived first, flanked by his military advisors. The Seltharian High Priestess Shalara came next, her scales shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that indicated her emotional state. Director Elena Vasquez entered last, accompanied only by Admiral Rodriguez. The countdown clock on the wall read 47 hours and 19 minutes. Vortex gestured to the seats with one of his forearms. Director Vasquez, Admiral Rodriguez, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Perhaps we can resolve this situation before it escalates further. Elena took her seat calmly. Chancellor, the situation has already escalated. 3,000 of my people are dead. The time for preventing escalation ended when you laughed at my warning. High Priestess Shalara's scales flickered red, a sign of agitation. Director, the Galactic Sovereignty Union has maintained peace for 10,000 years through established hierarchies and traditions. Your species threatens to destabilize everything we have built. We threaten nothing except your assumption that age grants unlimited authority, Elena replied. You've had 50 years to treat us as equals. Instead, you chose exploitation. You chose murder. Vortex held up a hand. Let us speak plainly. You have revealed a military capability that was completely unknown to our intelligence services. This fleet of yours, these weapons, where did they come from? Admiral Rodriguez spoke for the first time. We built them, starting 32 years ago, when it became clear that peaceful integration was not going to be an option. We built them, in secret, using facilities hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae. We developed technology specifically designed to counter GSU capabilities. And we trained crews who understand that sometimes peace can only be maintained through strength. Vortex's expression darkened. You violated every arms limitation treaty you signed. No, Elena said calmly. We violated the spirit of those treaties while carefully staying within their letter. Your treaties limited visible military construction and deployment. They said nothing about what we built in secret. You assumed we were being compliant because we are young and naive. We simply showed you what you wanted to see while preparing for the reality we knew would come. This is treachery, Shalara hissed. We welcomed you into galactic society, and you repay us with deception and threats. Elena's eyes went cold. You welcomed us as subjects, not equals. You established trade routes that exploited our resources. You claimed territories we had terraformed over decades. You attacked our civilian ships and research stations. And when we protested through proper channels, you laughed at us. So yes, we prepared for war in secret, because the alternative was to trust that you would eventually treat us fairly, and our history has taught us that trust without power is simply another word for slavery. The room fell silent. Vortex and Shalara exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between the ancient allies. Finally, Vortex spoke. What do you want, Director? Elena pulled out a data tablet and placed it on the table. Our terms are simple. First, immediate withdrawal of all GSU military forces from territories claimed by humanity. Second, Return of all confiscated cargo and resources with interest. Third, reparations for the attack on the New Beginning and all other incidents over the past 3 years. Fourth, formal recognition of humanity's equal status in the GSU, including full voting rights and equal representation on all councils. She paused, then added. And fifth, binding arbitration for all future disputes under a neutral oversight body that includes representatives from younger races, not just the ancient powers. These terms are unacceptable, Shalara said flatly. They would fundamentally alter the structure of galactic governance. Yes, Elena agreed. That's the point. The current structure is built on exploitation of younger races by older ones. It needs to change. Vortex leaned back in his seat. And if we refuse? Then in 47 hours your forces in human territory will be destroyed. After that, we will begin systematic operations against GSU military installations until you accept our terms. You would wage war against the entire Galactic Sovereignty Union? Vortex's voice was incredulous. We outnumber you 100 to 1. Our industrial capacity is tens of thousands of times greater than yours. Even with your hidden fleet, you cannot win a protracted conflict. Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. Chancellor, you're thinking about this the wrong way. We don't need to win a protracted conflict. We just need to make the cost of continuing the current system higher than the cost of accepting change. What does that mean? It means your homeworlds are vulnerable. Elena's voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty. Every major population center in Kryndak space is currently targeted by at least one human warship. The same is true for Seltharian space and the territories of every other species that has participated in attacking us. We don't need to conquer you. We just need to make you understand that continuing aggression against humanity will result in consequences you are not prepared to accept. You're threatening genocide, Shalara said, her scales flashing bright red. No, Elena replied. We're threatening to do to you what you did to us. Targeted strikes on civilian infrastructure, blockades of trade routes, systematic harassment until you understand what it feels like to be powerless. The difference is that we will stop the moment you agree to our terms. You, apparently, would have continued until we cease to exist as an independent species. The silence stretched out. Vortex and Shalara both knew that the balance of power had shifted. Humanity's revelation had changed everything. The ancient races had believed themselves untouchable, protected by age and accumulated power. Now, they understood they had been living in an illusion, one that could shatter at any moment. We need time to consult with our governments, Vortex said finally. These decisions cannot be made by us alone. You have 47 hours, Elena said. Use them wisely. 22 hours later, everything changed. The attack came without warning. A strike force of Kryndak's elite warships, the Void Talons, materialized in Earth's solar system using experimental faster-than-light technology that humanity's sensors had never detected before. 30 ships, each one a masterwork of Kryndak's military engineering, designed specifically to penetrate defenses and deliver devastating first strikes. Their target was Earth itself. The Void Talons had bypassed humanity's outer defensive perimeter entirely. They had used routes through hyperspace that human scouts hadn't discovered yet. It was a brilliant tactical maneuver, the kind of operation that could only be mounted by a civilization with 10,000 years of military experience. If it succeeded, it would decapitate human leadership and prove that no matter how many ships humanity had built, they could not protect their homeworld. The attack force commander, Marshal Krenix, watched Earth grow larger on his screens. The blue-green planet hung in space like a jewel, completely unaware of what was coming. He had volunteered for this mission because he understood what was at stake. If humanity was allowed to succeed in their demands, it would inspire every younger race in the galaxy to challenge the old order. The ancient powers would fall, civilization would collapse into chaos, and everything the Kryndaks had built over millennia would crumble. This wasn't about pride or territory anymore. This was about survival of the galactic order itself. All ships prepare to fire on my mark, Krenix ordered. Target the continental landmasses. We'll reduce their industrial centers to rubble and their leadership to ash. After today, humanity will remember why the ancient races rule the stars. The 30 warships charged their weapons. plasma cannons capable of scouring continents, kinetic impactors that could trigger tectonic shifts, biological agents that could render entire regions uninhabitable. It was overwhelming force, enough to devastate a planetary civilization. Then the space around them lit up. Defense platforms appeared, hundreds of them, dropping stealth countermeasures simultaneously. They had been there all along, hidden in orbit around Earth, waiting for exactly this scenario. Krennic barely had time to process what was happening before the first kinetic lances fired. The battle lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The Void Talons were elite warriors, trained in every aspect of Void combat. But they had entered a kill zone designed by a species that had spent decades planning for this exact situation. The defense platforms had interlocking fields of fire. The kinetic lances struck with precision that suggested AI-assisted targeting. And behind them, rising from Earth's surface, came what appeared to be missile batteries but were actually something humanity had developed during the collapse and then improved upon for 50 years. Smart munitions, swarms of them, each one capable of independent targeting and maneuvering, each one designed to overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers and unpredictable flight patterns. The Kryndax had never seen anything like them because no other species had ever needed to develop weapons this sophisticated. Other species had evolved past their violent tendencies gradually. Humanity had been forced to master violence in order to survive it. Marshal Krennic watched his fleet die around him. His shields held for nearly 30 seconds before failing. In that time he saw 19 of his 30 ships simply cease to exist, torn apart by kinetic impacts and swarmed by munitions that seemed to think and adapt. He had time for one final thought before his own ship's reactor breached. We should have listened. The explosion lit up Earth's orbital space like a second sun. On Nexus Station, Vortex watched the reports come in with growing horror. The Void Talons, the pride of the Kryndax military, had been annihilated. Not defeated, not forced to retreat, but completely destroyed. Every single ship lost. Over 3,000 crew, the best warriors the Confederacy had produced, dead in less than 5 minutes, and humanity hadn't used their fleet to do it. They had used Earth's planetary defenses. Fixed installations that couldn't move, couldn't retreat, couldn't threaten anyone beyond their own solar system. If Earth alone was this well defended, what would happen if the GSU tried to attack human colonies? How many more secret defenses had humanity prepared? Director Vasquez's face appeared on Vortex's communication screen. Her expression was grim. Chancellor, I'm transmitting footage of what just happened at Earth. I want you to understand something. We didn't start this. We gave you warnings. We gave you deadlines. We gave you every possible chance to choose peace. And your response was to try to murder my homeworld. I did not authorize that attack, Vortex said. And it was true. The Void Talons had been a desperate gambit by hardliners in the Kryndax military, launched without full governmental approval. We would never have sanctioned such an action. It doesn't matter anymore. Elena's voice was heavy with something between sorrow and rage. Your people tried to kill billions of humans, children, elderly, civilians who have never left their planet. And now those same people are watching their defense systems burning your ships out of the sky. Do you understand what you've done? You've made it personal. You've made it about survival. And there is nothing more dangerous than a species fighting for its survival. Behind her, Vortex could see Admiral Rodriguez and other human military leaders. Their faces showed the same grim determination. These were people who had just watched their homeworld nearly die and had successfully defended it. They were not going to be merciful. What do you want from us? Vortex asked, and heard the defeat in his own voice. Elena leaned forward. The countdown clock just expired. You have 12 hours to begin withdrawing from all human territories. You have 72 hours to provide a detailed plan for reparations. And you have 1 week to convene an emergency council session where you will formally propose restructuring the GSU to include equal representation for all member species. And if we refuse, then we will demonstrate what happens when humanity stops showing restraint. We will target every military installation in Kryndax space. We will blockade your trade routes. We will make it impossible for you to function as a civilization until you comply. And we will do all of this without targeting a single civilian. Because unlike you, we actually understand the difference between military necessity and mass murder. Vortex closed his eyes. In his 3 centuries of life, he had never imagined this moment. The Kryndax Confederacy had ruled portions of the galaxy for 10 millennia. They had believed themselves invincible. Now, a species barely 50 years in space had brought them to their knees. "I will convey your terms to the Confederacy leadership," he said quietly. "I cannot guarantee they will accept. Then I suggest you convince them." Elena's expression softened slightly. "Chancellor, I don't want to destroy your civilization. I don't want to wage war across the galaxy. But I will if I must, because my people deserve to live free from exploitation and fear. We came to the stars hoping for peace and partnership. We're still hoping for that. But we will not accept anything less than equality." The communication ended. Vortex sat in silence for a long moment, then summoned his advisors. The discussion that followed lasted 8 hours. Arguments were made for continued resistance, for gathering the full might of the GSU and crushing humanity once and for all. But the tactical assessments kept coming back to the same conclusion. Humanity had prepared for this conflict far better than anyone had imagined. They had studied the GSU's tactics and developed counters. They had identified vulnerabilities and created weapons specifically designed to exploit them. And most importantly, they had the will to use those weapons. In the end, the decision was unanimous. The cost of continuing the conflict was too high. 72 hours after Elena's final warning, Kryndax forces began withdrawing from human territories. The Seltharians followed suit within hours, not wanting to stand alone against humanity's revealed military power. Other GSU members, particularly the younger races, watched with barely concealed hope. If humanity could force the ancient powers to negotiate as equals, perhaps others could as well. The emergency council session was held 3 weeks later. It was unlike any meeting in the GSU's 10,000-year history. For the first time, every species had equal voice, not just the ancient powers. Representatives from races that had been subjugated for centuries stood alongside the Kryndax and Seltharians, all of them equal under the new charter. Elena stood before the assembled delegates and spoke about the formation of what would be called the Coalition of Free Worlds. It was a new organization, built on principles of mutual respect and genuine equality. Membership in the old GSU would become voluntary. Species could choose to join the new coalition or chart their own path. But exploitation, the systematic use of power to subjugate weaker civilizations, would no longer be tolerated. The vote was overwhelming. 347 species chose to join the coalition. Only 37 remained with the old GSU structure, mostly the ancient races clinging to their traditions. But even they accepted the new realities. The age of unchallenged dominance by ancient powers was over. 5 years later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the Coalition Assembly Station, looking out at the stars. The station had been built jointly by dozens of species, a symbol of cooperation rather than domination. It orbited a neutron star, the same star that had once hosted Galileo's Eye Research Station before the Kryndax destroyed it. The new facility was a memorial and a promise. Never again would knowledge seekers be attacked for pursuing understanding. Admiral Rodriguez joined her at the viewport. He had retired from active military service but remained as an advisor to the Coalition Defense Force, a truly multi-species organization dedicated to protecting all member worlds equally. "Thinking about the cost?" Rodriguez asked quietly. Elena nodded. "The new beginning victims, the crew of determined response, the Kryndax crews who died trying to attack Earth, all of them dead because the GSU refused to accept that younger races deserved equality, but their deaths led to this." Rodriguez gestured at the station around them. "Real cooperation, real peace, not the enforced quiet of domination, but the genuine partnership of equals." Elena thought about that. The transition had not been easy. There had been resistance, particularly from traditionalists among the ancient races. Economic disruptions as exploitative trade relationships were restructured. Political upheaval as old power structures crumbled. But slowly, painfully, a new order had emerged, one where species worked together because they chose to, not because they were forced to. "We warned them," Elena said softly. "For 50 years we warned them. We showed patience. We followed their procedures. We tried every peaceful option. And they laughed at us until we stopped being patient. Rodriguez nodded. Sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to demonstrate that the cost of war is too high. We didn't want to be warriors. We wanted to be explorers and scientists and traders. But they forced us to remember what we were capable of. A chime sounded, indicating the start of the coalition assembly session. Elena and Rodriguez made their way to the chamber, where representatives from hundreds of worlds waited. Today's agenda included proposals for joint scientific ventures, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. The business of a civilization learning to work together. As Elena took her seat, she thought about humanity's journey. From the ashes of the collapse, through 50 years of patience in the face of exploitation, to the moment when patience ended and humanity showed the galaxy what they were truly capable of. It had been a long and painful road, but it had led here to this moment where species who had once looked down on humanity now worked alongside them as equals. Where younger races no longer feared the ancient powers because those powers had learned that age did not grant unlimited authority. Elena had given the Galactic Sovereignty Union every warning. They had chosen not to listen. And in the end, humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo through the ages. That peace is not the absence of capability for war, but the choice not to wage it. And that choice must be respected by all, regardless of age or power. The session began. The work of building a better galaxy continued, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the human defense fleet maintained its silent vigil, a reminder of what would happen if anyone mistook humanity's choice for peace as inability to wage war. They had been warned. The galaxy had learned, and now, finally, there was hope for genuine peace among the stars.